I don't know how y'all did, but I grew up in 3rd Ward in Houston, and if a bully came and punched you in the mouth, you didn't sit there and cry. You better punch back unless you're going to keep getting punched.
Virginia House Speaker Don Scott has just announced that the state is going to be fighting back against the Trump administration's redistricting efforts in states like Texas, Indiana, and North Carolina by doing a mid-decade redistricting themselves, going from a 6-5 Democratic majority to a potential 10-1. Yeah. You heard that right. From 5 Republican seats down to just 1. Now, the voting on the redrawing has not occurred yet, and it will likely take place in January with a later date set to be scheduled for the public to vote on the legislation, but it is largely supported by the state's Democratic base and lawmakers, so it's looking pretty likely. This new piece of legislation would net the Democrats a potential 4 new seats in the House in 2026, just absolutely crushing Republican attempts to hold control next year. And you know what? I can't even be mad. Like, yes, okay, gerrymandering, not the best. It's kind of bad. However, the Republicans and Donald Trump kind of started this whole thing, and they have been benefiting from partisan gerrymandering for decades. A lot more than Democrats have been. So, you know what? I say good on them and best of luck. This is really, really bad news for the Republicans come next year. So if you want to hear all about it, as well as the conflict brewing over redrawing maps in Indiana, be sure to stick around until the end of the video to learn all about that. And don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to the Raw America YouTube channel. Okay, let's dive in.
Well, first of all, we got to realize, we didn't want to have to do this. This was done because Donald Trump told Texas, Indiana, North Carolina, our neighbors, to rig the election and make sure his policies are so unpopular, he couldn't win the midterm. So he's rigging it, redrawing those states' maps, and basically disenfranchising Virginians, and disenfranchising other parts of the country who now their voices won't be heard. Their voices will be minimized because he's rigging the election.
So that right there is Virginia Democratic House Speaker Don Scott talking, and he was just asked to break down why Virginia is going down this path of redistricting for the midterms. And to him, this idea is clear. Donald Trump and the Republican Party are unpopular, right? Poll after poll after poll is saying it. These guys are in the negative. So what do Republicans do? Well, they do what they always do. They cheat. And I'm not talking about like rigged election or woke, voting machines here, changing the numbers. I'm talking about structural methods that Republicans have utilized for decades to win elections. Things like not having Election Day being a national holiday, or suppressing vote by mail initiatives in certain states, or sowing doubt in election integrity, disenfranchising Black and brown neighborhoods by limiting voting access to specific locations far away from population centers, or blocking all legislation to give DC and Puerto Rico statehood. And of course, redrawing congressional maps based on partisan lines to give your party a political advantage, just like what we're seeing here. It is the same playbook we've been seeing since the Voting Rights Act passed in 1965. Every single step since that point from the Republican Party has been to try to limit the number of people who can vote. That is their policy. That is their agenda. That is what they want to do. It is intentional because the less people that vote, the more likely they are to win. And here we are again in the modern day. But Virginia is saying hell no, and they're actually fighting back. And finally, the Democrats are flipping the script on this issue. Because listen, if Democrats have to play the system a bit to give people their health care back or to reintroduce environmental protections, it's fine by me. Republicans have been doing it for decades to strip people from their health care, to ruin environmental protections, to get rid of social safety nets. That is kind of their whole policy agenda. So if the Democrats are doing it too, then can't say I blame them.
I don't know how y'all did, but I grew up in 3rd Ward in Houston, and if a bully came and punched you in the mouth, you didn't sit there and cry. You better punch back unless you're going to keep getting punched. And that's where we are right now. We have a bully, and he has a bully pulpit, and he's bullying these folks in these states to change the rules. And so we have an opportunity, we have an obligation, I think, to stand up and do something different.
I love that he changes his wording here from opportunity to obligation, because I see it that way too. He'll mention it in a second, and I'll let the video play, but it is exactly it. Virginia has a trifecta in their government of Democrats. They are one of the few states in the country with the population, the influence, and the leverage to make a meaningful change in this fight. And they're taking it.
And in Virginia, because we have this trifecta, we have an opportunity to do some redistricting, to look at redrawing the maps. Our congressional delegation right now is 6-5 Democrats, 6 Democrats, 5 Republicans. 10-1 is not out of the realm. And I think, you laugh. I'm not joking.
I think it's
no, 10-1 is not out of the realm to be able to draw the maps in a succinct, community-based way.
And there is the 10-1 conversation. And the interviewer laughs. He literally laughs because it is such a major, major change in the maps. But the leader says that it is doable and it is not out of the question. That is why I've been saying that it's potentially a 10-1. It could be, I don't know, a 9-2 or an 8-3, but we'll see. And so the question is that if they can get the voters out to have the map pass. But it seems like they probably will be able to do that because this leader wouldn't come out publicly to say that this could be a 10-1 if there wasn't a clear path there. So this could be a huge shakeup in the Virginia electoral map. The speaker then goes on to talk about how this is going to fall on the voters eventually. Like in California, they are going to vote on a resolution to adopt new maps that the legislature draws.
We'll set a date, pass some legislation to set a date for an election to happen on whether we should adopt that proposed constitutional amendment to allow us to do what they call the decennial, right? Every 10 years. So a mid-decennial redrawing of the maps. And that's what we would do if we were able to pass that. So y'all going to be seeing a lot of more TV commercials again. I apologize in advance because it's going to be a whole campaign. And hopefully most of y'all will support it because we cannot allow folks to rig the system in the middle of the cycle and we not respond. And that's what we're doing.
So he says right here, yeah, it's going to fall on the voters to decide what happens, but he is urging them to get out and allow them to make the changes to fight these attacks on voting across the country because, as we've talked about, Trump is super unpopular. He is losing big time right now if they don't rig the election in their favor, and most red states don't need to call an election and ask their voters to change the maps because they give control to the legislative branch, to the Congress of the state, not an independent committee like a lot of Democratic states do, which is another way Republicans game the system in their favor and disenfranchise people. But anyway, if this vote passes in Virginia, they will be able to change their maps in the middle of the decade to counter these changes. And the Congress seems pretty unified on the issue, unlike some other states that are going through some redistricting battles of their own, particularly Indiana.
But when it comes to how they'll vote on redistricting, Republican state senators Spencer Deary and Ron Olting are on opposite sides of this debate. Less than a week before the Senate could get the redistricting bill, Senator Spencer Deary says he's still a no on it, in part because of what he says his constituents are saying.
What I'm hearing is concerns about rising utility rates. I'm hearing concerns about rising grocery prices. That's what people want us to be focused on.
Yeah, so Indiana is going through their own mid-decade redistricting right now, called upon by the Trump administration to try to rig the election in their favor. Again, we've been seeing it here. But they have a majority Republican caucus there. However, some of the members of their base are a no on the piece of legislation because it will limit the voting power of certain rural areas in the state that are close to Indianapolis, who are now lumped in with the city, which is insane. Also, just look at this map. Republicans are splitting up Marion County there in the center, which is home to Indianapolis, a Democratic seat, into 4 different districts, just like cutting it across just to get rid of that one seat. It's just bad policy, and of course people are going to be against it. Senator Spencer Deary says that the map will incentivize candidates who are from the city to run for those districts and will mostly campaign there in the major city because that's where most of the people are who will be voting in the election, which will hurt the representation from the rural communities around Indianapolis. So that's why he's not voting for it. Senator Deary is also risking a lot here voting against this map because apparently there have been some calls from upstairs in Washington to vote a certain way or things may not go how you want them to.
I've had comments made to me from Washington that if I didn't, there'd be consequences in terms of my constituent funding, particularly Purdue University, particularly on the SNAP program, particularly in the Medicaid funding.
The senior senator wouldn't say who made those comments, but talked about the recent government shutdown where people briefly lost their SNAP benefits.
Yeah, that is a senator just admitting that he's practically being threatened by people in the Trump administration to vote a certain way on this legislation or we are going to cut funding for your district. Like, what kind of mafia corruption bullshit is this? It's a shitty map, putting aside the partisan gerrymandering, which is like the main problem here, but putting that aside, it just sucks. Like splitting up neighborhoods and communities and Purdue University, all of this weird housing there, all in the name of just picking up a couple extra seats. It's bad policy, and yet it may pass because of this outsized pressure coming in from the Trump administration. However, even the senator voting yes on this legislation doesn't think it's going to get there.
I know it's not going to get through. You know, the votes aren't there.
Whether Senator Olting is right remains to be seen. The redistricting bill still making its way through the process in the House. The Senate not expected to take up this bill until next week if it indeed passes in the House.
So it sounds like good news across the board. Indiana is failing in their redistricting, and Virginia seems to be going pretty well. So I guess we'll just have to wait and see, because Donald Trump fucked around, and now he is seeing the consequences of those actions. He started this fight, and now he is losing, because intimidation can only get you so far. But all right, I think that's going to do it for me. Thank you so much for sticking around until the end of the video. I really do appreciate it. If you like this video or want to see more like it, be sure to leave a like down below, and also comment what you think about this crazy redistricting battle that's going on, and don't forget to subscribe to the Raw America YouTube channel. Have a nice day.